I must admit a sense of reticence preaching on this passage. I am economically comfortable, North American male, all of which is patently obvious and I think needs stating still. And yet there have been times in my life when, like any one of us, I have not felt so privileged. The most outstanding example of my privilege loss in my life that I can recall was many, many years ago when I found myself incarcerated for 3 months. It was in prison that I rediscovered the daily bread of my Protestant tradition through daily participation in Catholic services. I attended these Eucharistic services because they were available. And while I was in prison, I needed a sense of daily balm for all the social distancing around. And it was in those daily Eucharistic services I experienced that social balm in a very, very profoundly spiritual way. For it was in those services I learned to say the Hail Mary, which begins with Gabriel's greeting to Mary today. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Full of grace. Gabriel's greeting, and twice today to Mary, full of grace, rendered in most of our Bibles as favored one. And yet in that prison, I was not feeling favored by God or by anyone else. And I'm sure that Mary was not feeling favored either, held captive to that overpowering voice. And I am sure we are not feeling favored in our quote unquote incarcerations today, cloistered in our socially distant places. Well, fear not. The Greek word here, oft translated as favored one, literally means one full of grace. And this gives me pause, and it makes me think. It makes me think that as for me in prison and knowing that Mary was held captive herself, and knowing each of us is isolated from one another today, can we believe Gabriel's greeting is for us as well? That we are each endowed to be full of grace. Can we believe that? And how can God's gracefulness, God's gracefulness, be experienced by us as it was by Mary? As something conceivable for new birth in our lives. For what is happening all around us today is hard for any of us to conceive. And in such inconceivable times, our temptation is like Mary's, tempted to be afraid, overwhelmed, frustrated by what we cannot control, to retreat between our ears, to ruminate, to fulminate about things, to obsess. Anything to avoid being opened, to be changed, to be transformed. Now, perhaps Mary is too young and too innocent to be afraid and not be transformed. She is, we are told, perplexed by Gabriel's greeting. Not afraid, but perplexed. To which Gabriel then says, fear not. Angels say that, you know. But Mary is confounded. She is not cowering. She is curious and heartily craven. confounded yet curious, as we are presented the opportunity to be these perplexing, incarcerating, pandemic days. When we cannot be self-assertive as usual, we have witnessed the bitter harvest of self-assertion in our country. When we cannot be betrothed to our former self-identities, lest by losing that, feel disgraced. So let us hear again Gabriel's greeting today, as it might apply to us. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Could it be that we are a virgin to such fullness of grace? Asked by God to do nothing, nothing that is, except to accept the gift offered. To conceive the inconceivable. A child to be born, Gabriel says, who will be holy among us, around us. Dare we say, from within us. God's fullness of grace, waiting to be born among us, to accept in inconceivable times how that grace is being conceived among us. Here I am, Mary says, the servant of the Lord. Let it be. We might question, here I am with Mary. And yet here she becomes the first human bearer of our faith's good news. Not by trying to show God how good she can become, but by allowing God to show her how good God can be. Here I am. Let it be. The poet, Presbyterian ruling elder, and Benedictine oblate, Kathleen Norris. Norris puts it well when she writes that God has put us together on the road to Christmas. It is never the right time, and we are never ready. We have other, more important things to do. The burden is too great for us to carry. But once we say, here am I, the servant of the Lord, the angel will depart and the path will open before us. Here I am, Mary says. Let it be. God's fullness of grace for us to accept in inconceivable times. In inconceivable times, how that grace can be conceived among us anew. Thanks be to God. Amen.